Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation. As any good lawyer, I must give a disclaimer before I speak. The views and opinions expressed here are those of the speaker, are not the views and opinions of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions or of Ms. Paula Llewellyn, the Director of Public Prosecutions. I don't want, if I say anything here that you disagree with, you go out and say the DPP and Ms. Llewellyn, what kind of patty shop them running, on King Street, downtown. The second disclaimer, which I will say, is that, when persons address, notable audiences such as pharmacists, they ought to have the gravitas of someone like a P.J. Patterson. They ought to have the oratorical skill of someone like a Michael Manley. They ought to have the intellect of, say, a Rex Nettleford. And they ought to bring some amount of controversy like a Vibes Cartel. But I have none of these gifts. So let me hope that you have eaten in the event you wish to fall asleep while I am speaking. The third thing is that when Vivian, because she has been after me for years to come and do one of these things, and I've managed to duck it, but I couldn't duck it because I was on vacation leave at the time she asked me. So in my desperation to be familiar with some of the terms and the jargon and some of the practices of pharmacists, I called my sister-in-law, who is a pharmacist. And so let me accept that any error that I make in any pronunciation or in name of medication or in practice is entirely my fault and not hers, because I tended to call her while she was on the job and dispensing, so I'm quite sure she didn't have as much time to give me as she thought she could. So I want to look at the whole aspect of the Constitution. I'm aware that, pharmacists gather and you've been looking at diverse topics. I know that my colleague, Ms. Jackson, has come here and spoken to pharmacists. I know up to fairly recently, my colleague, Mr. Orrit Brown, came here and spoke. To my consternation, there was a YouTube video. I don't video well, just in case people are thinking to put me on YouTube. I will crack the lens. But I wanted to look at an aspect of the Constitution of Jamaica, because constitutional issues have become very current. It's a brief history of the Constitution. It came into being on August 6, 1962, and it is the Constitution Order in Council. But the Constitution did not remain unchanged. And in 2011, April 7 to be exact, Jamaica enacted an amendment to the Constitution. Like how you hear Americans talk about First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fifth Amendment to their Constitution. This could perhaps be called the First Amendment to the Constitution of Jamaica. So the old fundamental rights and freedoms were repealed and swept away, as it was felt that too many of these rights were hemmed in by exceptions. And a new charter of fundamental rights and freedoms were put in, and I've tried to itemize some of these rights that we have, which are absolute and fundamental, and there are no exceptions. Life, liberty, and security of the person, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom of movement, equality before the law, equitable and humane treatment by any public authority, freedom from discrimination, privacy, freedom of religion. And you may not be aware, but the Constitution has been in the news in recent times. And some things that you may find that you didn't know these were constitutional issues that were in the news. But for example, in the case of freedom of expression, there was a case of Maurice Tomlinson against TVJ and CVM. And the issue was whether freedom of expression includes right to use private property, TVJ and CVM, to exercise the right to promote pro-gay propaganda. There was also another freedom of expression case, that of Courtney Brendan Bain against the University of the West Indies, where Professor Bain went and gave testimony in Belize in relation to his findings of the transmission of HIV among men who have sex with men, well, have a sexual connection with men. And then there are privacy issues. Who cannot forget Julian Robinson against the Attorney General, which looked at the constitutional validity of the NIDS. So that was also a constitutional issue, that of privacy. Then there was also the right to trial within a reasonable time, that is Mervyn Cameron and the Attorney General, and also Patrick Chung and the Attorney General. Patrick Chung was interested. This was a report it was an incest case. It was a report made 30 years after the incident had happened. So just in case you hear people talking, for most criminal offenses in Jamaica, there is no statute of limitations. And then, many of you will remember, with the constitutional issue of freedom of association, especially the case dealing with undated letters of resignation, Andrew Holness against Arthur Williams. And then this one you may not know, but it was out there, freedom of movement. Stop order placed at ports of entry and departure when the person wasn't charged. And that was the children's advocate against Sidney Bartley. So these are some constitutional issues which you may not have thought were constitutional. You may have dismissed them, but they went to the interpretation of our fundamental rights and freedoms. And there are other issues not yet litigated but are in the public space. For example, abortion. There is a parliamentary committee studying whether or not it should be legalized or decriminalized. The little that I've learned about it, I don't know if pharmacists have weighed in on it yet, but it seems to me that you have a view and you should approach a parliamentary committee to weigh in on it, especially since you may be dispensing drugs to deal with this kind of thing. There is privacy once again. There is a parliamentary committee studying the implementation of a Data Protection Act. There is equality issues again. Gay rights activists barred from using the Montego Bay Civic Center. There is discrimination. What constitutes good hair? Child barred from school because her hair did not fit the school rules. So in the end, we all live in a majoritarian culture, there being a large body of public consensus on many issues, usually on the side to maintain the status quo. But I'm going to tell you, it may even distress you, but when you're looking at constitutional law, the issue is not what the majority of Jamaicans believe, but what the Constitution allows. So I'm going to look at 3 areas which give rise to 3 the hard way situations. That is, personal belief versus professional ethics versus the law. And I start out by looking at, that in your code of ethics, you say that a pharmacist's prime concern must be for the welfare of both patient. Let me see if it comes up. No. Does it say contraception right there? Oh. Oh. It's saying ethics? No. No, let me go back. Where I want to jump ahead, because unlike the speaker in Trinidad, I understand that a time limit will be shown to me. So let me start. So you are governed by a code of ethics that has been promulgated by the Pharmaceutical Society of Jamaica. And principle 1, pharmacist's prime concern must be the welfare of both patients and public. And then you have not only principles, but obligations. So obligations 1.1. You can see this was drafted by a lawyer. No patient shall be deprived of pharmaceutical services because of the personal convictions or religious beliefs of the pharmacist. Some pharmacists may object on the grounds of conscience to the dispensing of certain medicinal products. And I find this term medicinal products very interesting. You know why? It is not defined in your code of ethics. It is not defined in the Pharmacy Act. It is not defined in the Food and Drugs Act. So where did I have to go to find a definition of medicinal products? I went to the oracle of all things, Google. And it led me to a lot of sites, you know, WHO and so on. But I have come to the view that the very innocuous sounding medicinal products does relate to things like contraception. But the obligation goes further. In such cases, the patient involved must be advised of an alternative source of pharmaceutical supply. When we come to look at abortion, this is one of the things in the proposed abortion law, that even if you as a doctor don't believe in it, you must tell the person where they must go to get it. So this has raised the whole thing of saying, but if I don't believe in it, why I must aid and abet it? So there probably are pharmacists who believe the same. So let me come to contraception issues. So this is the first issue, 3 the hard way. And I've deliberately decided to start with a topic relating to sex, because I know that it will arouse your interest and that it will get a rise out of your attentive prowess. So, contraceptive issues are on the, really and truly at the cold face of being a pharmacist. And you may not have thought about it, that the whole thing of dispensing condoms, female condoms, Postinor is what I believe it is called, and so on, that it really couldn't get any constitutional issue arising out of this. So, in order to illustrate what I'm talking about, I decided to create a scenario. The case of Gail Hotbody and Mary Blessed. So let me hope that I was told that the scenarios were printed and included in your package. So I've tried to make it, as realistic as possible. But Gail Hotbody is a sexually active Jamaican woman, the kind who can saw wood in the same way that men chop bush. She enjoys sex and she has a very active sex life. And because of that, she is known to the people at the Good Stuff Pharmacy and Cannabis Emporium. So she always comes there. And then she has come in the last month for the six times for the emergency contraceptive. Mary Blessed works at this pharmacy. She is not a fan of Gail Hotbody. Mary Blessed is an elder at the Church of the Holy Fire and Water Baptized, where she is the Sunday school superintendent and the Women's League president. She's happily married and has 7 children. She does not believe in contraception among married couples, as there should be no barrier to the expression of love between husband and wife. But she has been speaking to her colleagues about Gail Hotbody and Gail Hotbody's lustful and licentious lifestyle. So the last time Gail comes in to get the usual injection, Mary Blessed says, I have a word for you. So what does Mary Blessed? So Gail says, what word do you have for me? And Mary begins at the top of her voice, because This is a fifth Thursday and it's senior citizens discount day. So a whole lot of senior citizens are getting discounts on their medication and that. So the pharmacy is packed. So Mary begins at the top of her voice. Repent, repent of your sins, I say. Give up the dirty life and turn to Jesus. You're too money. And the man you're there with is your cousin, baby father, uncle. Every day you in here a purchase condom, pill, and pastinor. No more in Jesus' name, no more. Get married and give your life to God. Is what you hear, that God will take back sex and you will get every last drop of it before it done? Repent, me not give you any, because I am a child of the Most High, Jesus. So, Gail is shocked and stunned. Gail is shocked and stunned. Too embarrassed. She can't even say, she's so shocked, she can't even say, hold your position, demon. That even that was able to come out of her mouth. So, Gail comes out of the pharmacy and she goes her way. 2 weeks later, Mary is summoned to the pharmacy council to answer a complaint made by Gail Hotbody that she's a Bible-thumping religious zealot who embarrassed her. At the hearing, Mary admits everything and tells the council, yes, I did it, but I'm a child of the Most High, and I place God's law over man's law any day. Hallelujah. And she begins to sing Rondell Positive's Cover Me, Cover Me, Cover Me. So, the question I ask, what should the pharmacy council do with Mary Blessed? Because Mary Blessed is one asserting her personal convictions as a religious person. The Charter of Rights says she has a right to the exercise of the freedom of her faith. But then, when we go back to obligation 1.1, there seems to be that the professional ethic trumps your religious faith. So what then should the pharmacy council do with Mary Blessed? I'm throwing it out to the room. I'll take probably 3 answers. We have an answer from this table over here. They should warn her. Let me see over that side of the room where I am pointing a table. Is that 13? What should the pharmacy council do?
13.
Over there, over there. Over there. Yes, I see a hand raised right by the microphone there. In the mic, and then we'll take lady right here.
So the breach of privacy was breached as regards the lady's right not to have her condition or whatever broadcasted.
Exactly.
And the right of the Mary, whatever her name is, Blessed, should have only the referral. In that if she can't deal with the lady's lifestyle, she should refer her to someone else, and not embarrass her as she did. So the pharmacy council should let her apologize to the lady that was embarrassed.
So you said the pharmacy council should make her issue an apology. Okay, the last comment over here. This lady with the blonde hair right here.
I believe the council should just tear up her license.
Well, that is harsh. By the way, I am going to tell you. All right. I'll take one more, way at the back.
What I would...
Sorry, can we all listen? Can we all listen?
What I think should be done is that the council should have audience with Mary Blessed. and told her that.
No, man, but she's already there, you know.
All right, okay.
Remember, she's singing "Cover me, cover me, cover me" to the people.
Well,
so she's already there.
Yeah, hold on. The council shouldn't let her apologize, all right, to the lady. But I think there's a way to go about it, in terms of inviting the both of them at the council, you understand me, and let her apologize by way of a written letter to the lady. Because there is a professional demeanor or code that Mary Blessed knows that she should follow. So even though her religious persuasions is different from the professional one, she has to strike that media, that she has to remember she's a professional, and also her religious obligation to as well. So she should strike that media that does not have a bias where the lady is concerned.
All right. I'm going to tell you as I go through this, I'm not going to give you any kind of answer which is the right answer. I'm just telling you these are difficult situations which may present themselves to you as you go about your professional business. And that, as I say, it's professional ethics versus personal ethics versus legal and constitutional rights. And this is a way, albeit I've exaggerated much, but this is a way in which it could arise. But as we stick with contraceptive issues, if you look, the Gleaner of February 13, 2007, I know you know the date of that story is one day before Valentine's Day. The Ministry of Health revealed that the age at which more than 50% of young people, particularly boys, become sexually active is under 16 years. I know a lot of places in Jamaica, it's either initiation through the helper, it is a furtive fumbling in a cane piece, it is somewhere in some bush or empty classroom. Whatever it is, it takes place. The Observer, February 15, 2008, and again you know this, published the day after Valentine's Day, conducted by the Women's Center, revealed the following information, and it looked at girls who got pregnant when they were pregnant at high school age and whether or not that they had parents who had been a pregnant teenager. And it also tried to give a parochial breakdown. So if you look at Kingston, which had the most, 196. Oh, sorry. Yes. Kingston had 196. The number pregnant at 16 was 83. Number pregnant at high school age was 151. And out of those, 118 of them had parents who had been a pregnant teenager. So there seems to be a cycle that is perpetuating itself in the country. So if you look at, again, Mandeville, Montego Bay, and so on. So again, these are issues. So the whole thing of contraception is not only a moral issue, but it's also a public health issue in that case. And again, you pharmacists are on the front line. So we know that children in Jamaica are sexually active. We know that the law states that the age of consent for sex in this country is 16. We know that the age of childhood in this country is 0 to 17. We know that the age of adulthood in this country is age 18. I want to look at this obligation which seems to be in conflict with the law. That a pharmacist must not supply any medicinal product to a child unless satisfied that the product will be used safely. But then look at the Law Reform Age of Majority Act. Contrast it with Section 8, where a minor has attained the age of 16 years. His consent in respect of any surgical, medical, or dental treatment to himself shall be as effective as it would have been if he were of full age. And where a minor has, by virtue of the provisions of this section, given an effective consent in respect of any such treatment, it shall not be necessary for consent to be obtained from the parent or guardian of that minor in respect of that treatment. So What we have here is a conflict between the law of the land, that is the law reform, Age of Majority Act, and the pharmacist's obligations. So as I say, it can easily be seen that the dispensing of medicinal products could be seen as a medical treatment. So let me not even go on to an under 16 child. Say a 16-year-old child comes to your pharmacy, 16 or 17, and I'm going to use a female because as I speaking to my sister-in-law, I realized that many female contraceptive products are not necessarily sold over the open counter. Some of them you may actually have to go and speak to a pharmacist about. So to say that she goes to the pharmacist for one of these medicinal products. So the pharmacist, which by the way, please note, the obligation does not say you can't dispense it to a child. You know. It says you must be satisfied that it will be used safely. It does not say anything about consulting the child's parents. It does not say anything about consulting the child's guardian. So what you need to do, if I follow what your obligation says, is that you need to sit down and explain how the medicinal product is to be used. And then you must be satisfied that this 16 or 17-year-old child understands. So again, Mary Blessed may have a problem with this. Many pharmacists may have a problem with this, but your own principles and obligations state. Don't put that you must go and discuss it with the parent. In fact, sorry, let me go back. Must respect the confidentiality of information. So this 16 and 17-year-old has a legitimate expectation that the pharmacist is not going to pick up the phone and call any parent or guardian unless there is an exceptional or exigent circumstance. And I say exceptional or exigent circumstance because you know that under the Child Care and Protection Act, you are what are called proscribed persons. If it comes to your attention that a child is being molested or abused or neglected or ill-treated, you must report it. You don't have a discretion. You must report it. If you fail to report it and your authorities find out, that is $500,000 fine or 6 months imprisonment. So you must report it. So then there's a whole thing of the confidentiality. You, as pharmacists, many of you sitting here, perhaps are parents of children. And you would like to think or like to know that, boy, if it was your child, somebody would take up the phone and call you and tell you about it. So, again, I throw it out there. These are the personal ethics, professional ethics, and constitutional issues that arise just in the day-to-day activity of doing your job. In fact, let me move on. So let me come to the second one, abortion. Now, in our cousins to the north, this is a big issue. Supreme Court judges are selected on it. Presidents are elected on this issue. Clinics have been firebombed. People demonstrate with their placards demanding that they want justice for the unborn or they want life and so on. What are the constitutional issues being raised here? Well, there's a whole aspect of bodily autonomy and privacy. I have the right to do what I want to do with my body. And then there's a whole debate as to whether or not the fetus is a human being or is just a lump of flesh. So there's all that whole debate. How was it reignited in Jamaica? Private Members' Motion 61 of 2018 by Member of Parliament for St. Andrew West Rural, Juliet Cuthbert Flynn. Be it resolved that this Honorable House consider the recommendations of the Abortion Policy Group, which was established to provide guidance to allow women the right to choose. Be it further resolved that this Honorable House takes steps to repeal Sections 72 and 73 of the Offences Against the Persons Act and substitute therewith a civil law titled the Termination of Pregnancy Act, as recommended by the Abortion Policy Review Group in 2007. The Gleaner in January 2008 revealed that abortion is being used for contraceptive purposes. Since 250 out of the study, that is 39%, admitted to having had an abortion before. So they are repeat abortionists, repeat aborters or whatever. And 231% of these 641 women revealed that they had 2 or more previous abortions. So the usual argument that you hear up north, that it is being done because, it could be dangerous. It could be dangerous to carry the pregnancy. This is not necessarily the case. People are using it as how you use a sheath, or use birth control pill, or so on. Get pregnant, they go, and they deal with it. Now, let me bring to your attention Section 72 of the Offences Against the Persons Act, because there are 2 provisions that govern abortion in this country. So Section 72 says, every woman being with child who with intent to procure her own miscarriage shall unlawfully administer to herself any poison or other noxious thing, and other noxious thing has been interpreted by the law to also include products dispensed by pharmacists, or shall unlawfully use any instrument or other means whatsoever with the like intent. So that speaks about the woman herself. The next section of this speaks about the aider and abettor. And whosoever with intent to procure the miscarriage of any woman, whether she be or be not with child. So what the law says, you don't actually have to be pregnant. You just need to believe that you are. So what happens then is that impossibility is not a defense here. Well, if I am not pregnant, you can't charge me. No, that's not what the law says here. As long as you believe that you are pregnant, even if you are not, you can still be charged. And shall unlawfully administer to her or cause be taken by her any poison or other noxious thing, or use any instrument, shall be liable to be imprisoned life with or without hard labor. Then Section 73, which is the drug section. Whosoever shall unlawfully supply or procure any poison or other noxious thing or any instrument, knowing that the same is intended to be unlawfully used or employed with intent to procure the miscarriage of any woman, whether she be or be not with child, shall be guilty of a misdemeanor, and for a term not exceeding 3 years. So here is where pharmacists need to exercise judgment, especially as to how you dispense these drugs. You have to be sure who it is dispensing it to. I think my sister-in-law told me that many of these things like these ought to be dispensed only with a prescription by a doctor. But we are aware, especially on my part, with the few abortion cases that I have seen, that these products seem to be available and are being dispensed without a doctor's prescription. They're being done under the sly, and so on. And so far, nobody has coughed up their pharmacist yet. They've coughed up the doctor, and I believe that if you can have a high-status person as a doctor standing in the prisoner's dock, it's not a stretch that one day you'll be standing with a pharmacist beside him if the investigation manages to reveal it. So, what then if a pharmacist does these things? Section 75BC of the Pharmacy Regulation says that the following shall be considered professional misconduct: conspiring to produce a miscarriage and unlawfully procuring or attempting to procure a miscarriage. So the pharmacy regulations, which are law now, are in sync with Section 72 and 73 of the Offences Against the Persons Act, which is why I'm asking. I'm aware of other groups that have gone to Parliament to testify before the committee examining the law about this, but I must confess, I have not heard if pharmacists have gone. If you have not gone, I urge you to go, to make your submissions and organizational views known, to shape whatever law that will be coming down the line soon, because no matter what is being talked about, morality and life of the unborn and so on, the fact is, at some point in Jamaica's history, a law like that is going to be passed. And if you want to have an input in it that you don't find obligations onerous, I would suggest that you find yourselves before the parliamentary committee and have your opinions known. There are 5 features about the law of abortion in Jamaica which I have managed to identify. 1, there are no legally prescribed exceptions. If you go back to Section 72 and 73, you did not see an exception. There was none at all. What the judges and the lawyers have done is to say, and if I go back, well, let me go back. Is that Section 73? Yes. What they have done is to interpret that word unlawfully there, meaning that if something is lawful, there must be a lawful exception. So that is how it is that pregnancies which may affect the health, and health here also includes the mental health of the person carrying the child, you can terminate these pregnancies. So it is what we would say is judicial creativity, to create an exception where none exists. I'm told that there's a branch of philosophy called rules to break rules. It's called casuistry. So what you're giving an example here is casuistry in action. You create a rule to break a rule, especially which seems inflexible. So we're coming back to 5 features of the law in abortion. 2, there are no guidelines as to how old the fetus or infant has to be before an abortion can be done. So doctors are at large. 3, notwithstanding the provisions of Section 8 of the Law Reform Age of Majority Act, a child cannot consent to an abortion. Strictly speaking, no one in Jamaica can really and truly give consent to an abortion. 4, the father or male spouse has no rights or interests worthy of consideration. Rights of fatherhood begin at birth and not before, according to the laws. And secondly, the words father and spouse can only apply in Jamaica in a heterosexual context, as Jamaican law does not recognize non-heterosexual unions. And 5, there are no restrictions, if any, as to what methods of abortion are legally possible. So let me go to scenario number 2. The case of Maida Money, Makeda Future, and Teresa Mothra. I hope you all have scenario 2 in your package. So Maida Money the wife of lots of money, is the owner of one of Jamaica's largest retail chains, Nuff and Plenty Things Mart. She lives in the exclusive and snooty area of Queen Elizabeth Heights. She belongs to many social clubs and is often pictured on the social scene and is usually photographed on page 2 of one of Jamaica's daily newspapers. She's a mother of 3 children. Her eldest child and her golden boy is Midas Money. He's 17 years old. He's a student at one of Jamaica's prominent high schools. He's an athlete. He's captain of the swim team, basketball team, and cricket team. He's very bright and handsome, very popular, pursued by his female colleagues. He has won a basketball scholarship to a private religious college in the southern United States. Maida has started telling people that she is going to be an NBA mom. Midas' scholarship has a morals clause. Makeda Possible is an office attendant at the Ministry of Finance. She lives in a rough inner city community which is prone to violent flare-ups and lockdowns by the police. She wants good for her 2 children and has managed to shield them from the violence and the neighborhood males. Her eldest child is Isis Possible, a 16-year-old who is a schoolmate of Midas Money. Isis's education is being sponsored by the ministry. She's a bright straight-A student, plays on a chess team, and is active in Key Club and ISCF. She's also quite beautiful and has been the center of attention of the boys in her school. Isis has a desire to be a doctor. Makeda has always boasted on her daughter, the future doctor, and that she's going to escape life in this back of God back community. Unknown to Maida and Makeda, both Midas and Isis are secret boyfriend and girlfriend. They talk on WhatsApp and text messages and take every chance to be together at school functions. At a school fete and in an empty classroom, that love blazed hot, hard, and quite quickly. After 2 months, Isis was unable to hide her growing pregnancy. Makeda wailed and railed at how Isis a fool for make the wicked Bakra boy give her belly. And how she don't say, how she, Makeda, scrimp and save to make her escape this wretched life. And how the ministry going to take back this sponsorship. Maida Money, on being told the news by Midas, boxed him twice in his face. She ranted as to how he let this ghetto trash trap him. And if he didn't realize that the scholarship has a morals clause. Both mothers separately wept and wailed and asked God, why me and how come? Eventually, Maida and Makeda met. And the plan was that Isis was to get an abortion. Maida said, because of her social connections, she will see to it. But no doctors, because that would arouse attention. Maida spoke to her former schoolmate, Teresa Muthra, who is the owner and senior pharmacist of Good Stuff Pharmacy and Cannabis Emporium, and also Midas' godmother. Teresa, so moved by the plight of her godson's future going up in smoke, then handed Maida some pills and gave her instructions on how to use them. Teresa told Maida that she wasn't to tell anyone where she got the pills because they can only be dispensed by prescription. Maida gave the pills to Makeda and instructions how to use them. Makeda handed them over to Isis and stood over her and watched her take them. 1 week later, Isis is rushed to Victoria Jubilee Hospital because of heavy bleeding and a foul discharge. The doctors work on Isis, but in their treatment, they had to remove her womb. Isis will never be able to have children. And that little fact is actually taken before from an abortion case that is actually before the courts at present. Took these pills, had this side effect, had to go to hospital, surgery had to be done, and no, she will never be able to have children again. The police are called, and in their investigation arrest Makeda, who saying she not go jail alone, leads them to Maida. And Maida, in her fright and shock, told the police about Teresa Mothra. All 3 women are at the Central Village lockup, awaiting court at Halfway Tree in 2 days' time. So the questions are, did Teresa do anything wrong? If so, what should the council do? And then in an alternative, what if Maida had a prescription and Teresa refused to dispense it and also refused to tell her where to source the drug? Could she be disciplined? So, no, you answered one already. Let me throw it out to somebody else in the room who has not yet answered. Yes, over there. So, I want the answer to question 2. What should the council do?
Good afternoon. Before we get to the question and the answer, I just want to...
Look here, them showing me 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So, you need to get to the answer.
Yeah, man, but I just needed to clear up something on the Offense Against Persons Act, Section 72 to 74, and the Pharmacy Regulation, Section 75, versus emergency contraceptive pill, because the use of the point of emergency contraceptive is to prevent pregnancy. So are you aiding and abetting an abortion based on that law?
I have not reached the emergency contraceptive yet. So somebody, what should the council do? There's a hand there.
The fact that the pharmacist didn't have a prescription, then that is clearly unlawful. So the council, in my opinion, should suspend her license.
Suspend her? Okay. Anybody else? What should the council do? All right, I don't have any more, so I'll take a repeat. Yes, sir.
Firstly, may I just quickly recap to the first one? No? All right.
Remember, my time is limited. They're rushing me right here.
All right, cut to the chase. The council is bound by law, because law is what governs the land. And it's a sad thing that these people didn't really realize, consulted lawyers, brilliant as yourself, sir, where there was a case with a noted OB and GYN who was charged, was before the court for an abortion case for a young miss, where the mother took her to the doctor. But they obviously utilized the law where the young miss was the one who pressed the case according to them, because she wasn't for it. So yes, so there was no that she could not be prosecuted by the law. And then she eventually dropped the case, and so the doctor got off.
All right, so what should the council do?
So the council need to report this to the legal.
But in terms of disciplining Teresa Mothra, what
yes,
should they do with her?
Well, it is there already. There's a thing that says that you're not supposed to be partaker of that. You lose your license.
So should she be reprimanded, suspended, or struck off?
Well, I don't know if there's a time for her to come back, as some of you lawyers come back after you are struck off.
I know, so you're trying to fling it back on me. Over here. Mr. Mike, over there.
Okay, so Teresa should be cited for professional misconduct. As to the actual punishment meted out by the council, I guess they would have to look at her track record to see if this was a first offense, and the council would just decide whether or not to maybe suspend her license for a period of time. But I don't think she should be struck off because of that, because she acted. And in a sense, this child was her God child, and so there's a hold on a second. Hello.
Can we all listen?
Yes.
We needed to wrap up your answer quick, because I said them flagging me here.
Basically, she was cited for professional misconduct, but the actual punishment as meted out by the council could be discretionary, so she don't necessarily have to be struck out.
You know, there's a proverb that says the road to hell is paved with good intentions, you know. It's the kind of asphalt we really don't want. Somebody should tell the Prime Minister every now and then, this road works. So, let me move on. All right, one more.
I believe this pharmacy should be suspended. The course will go, the court, there will be a court case, And if she's found guilty, she should be expelled from
All right. And the last
user
question,
license.
the last question which I had on the scenario. What if Maida had a prescription and Teresa refused to dispense it and refused to tell her where to go and get it as per obligation 1.1? I saw a hand over there.
With regards to the prescription, it depends on the dosage or how it was written for the patient to take it. And
Come, can we all listen?
for her refusing not to tell someone where to go, she can just claim that I don't know where to go.
All right, well, that is interesting because the council may have a different view in relation to that. Let me just make sure. Is that saying miscarriage up there? So, the issue now is whether the emergency contraceptive can be considered procuring a miscarriage. For example, is Postinor really an abortive fashion? And I hope I'm using that word properly. My sister-in-law told me, but I'm not sure if I'm using it in context. The court in England, and the law in England is the same as the law out here, that a miscarriage means the termination of an established pregnancy. And there can be no established pregnancy prior to implantation. This is a legal regime that allows you to dispense this drug. So let me come to the last one. Obia. And some would say that there has been a long-standing relationship between pharmacies and Obia. In fact, popular urban legend has it that there is a pharmacy downtown that dispenses these products, a registered pharmacy downtown that dispenses these products. For those who have thought that Obia had no impact, you just need to see that in October 19, 2018, at RADA, the RADA boss threatened to punish persons in the office who were working Obia. So Obia has affected employee relations in at least one government department that we know about. Then, in June of this year, the Justice Minister is quoted in the House of Representatives. There is no reason, Mr. Speaker, why the Obia Act should still remain on the statute book, and we hope to remove it in due course. So, the Minister of Justice was chucking the repeal of the Obia Act on all of Jamaica. He later qualified what he really meant. Then, if you look in some of the headlines that followed it, this is actually from Montego Bay. Woman detained for Obia oils and sprays. After leaving a candle shop and having her belongings searched by a cop in downtown Montego Bay yesterday, a young woman was told that she'd be detained for practicing Obia. What I found interesting was that the police never scraped up the owner of the candle shop, you know. They all scraped up the woman who had it in her bag. So then, in light of what I have said, that there is an urban legend that there is such a thing, let us look at the case of Aputha Cari alias Satchmo Pine Coffin. Aputha Cari, a pharmacist, is the owner of Things and Things Pharmacy. And he has seen his business decline since Teresa Mothra opened a cannabis emporium in her pharmacy. He has wondered how to recapture his old customers and add new customers. When he is not being a pharmacist, Aputha Cari operates as a self-styled healer and reader under the name of Satchmo Pine Coffin. Cari has decided that he will merge both businesses. Soon after, employees at Things and Things noticed that the shelves of the pharmacy began to be populated with various colored cloths, parchments, scented candles, oils, sprays, herbs, and soaps, all with a pine coffin logo on the label. Unbeknownst to the staff, all these items are being supplied by Apothecary. All these items were original concoctions manufactured by Cari in his kitchen. He converted his office into a consulting room that only he alone could enter. In there, he would read up his clients, and he kept things such as his robe, staff, head wrap, tarot cards, and dopidos inside there, varying tracts that he had written and printed. And he also had a large tin tub where he would also do baths. Cari, in his healer role, would write prescriptions for his clients, which he would fill at the pharmacy. These prescriptions were to be filled by only him alone. A pharmacy inspector came in undercover and saw bottles labeled Pine Coffin Diabetes Cure, Pine Coffin Front End Lifter, with a blurb, better than Viagra, a fertility potion named Have Out Your Lot to help women conceive. There were other things such as tie and bind oil, which will make your lover never leave you, and wash with crosses soap and get visa ointment. The inspector later returned with the police, where the stock was confiscated and the back room was discovered, and also his stack of prescriptions. A search of his house turned up the base of his manufacturing. Cari admitted he was Satchmo Pine Coffin, that he had a right to practice his trade as a pharmacist and a constitutional right to practice obeah. He said, "The items we sell are used to help persons in a way that no other spiritual movement in Jamaica is able to. Most people come here when all other things have failed: medical institutions, security institutions, and religious institutions." He was charged under the Food and Drugs Act. He was also charged with practicing obeah, possession of instruments of obeah, and distributing obeah literature, all of which are actual offenses. How should the council deal with Apothecary? We have an answer over there. Can we listen? Can we listen? Can we listen?
First, I'd like to say congratulations to Cari-Med on the 25th year. Secondly, I'd like to say praise the Lord to all the pharmacists in the house. Now, to Mr. Jerry Taylor.
Look, as long as you're bigging up people, I demand a big up to you.
Yeah.
I'll just let you know.
Jeremy? Right, sorry about that. Jeremy Taylor. I can perceive what the pharmacy council might do.
Which is?
It is against the law, and he has been charged.
So what they should do with him?
They would have to discuss it. But my question is, as a friend who, I have a friend who is a descendant of Nanny, the Maroon, who was a reported spiritual worker, and my thing is...
I was going to remind you to keep your question short because...
Yes, I am. My thing is, if it is that it was Indian Saguro who practiced mysticism, would it be the same, or is it that the word obeah is very African, and because of our historical culture, remember it became outlawed because the field slaves, they felt, based upon the reaction of my friend who is a descendant of Nanny, the field slave knew that when slave master
All
took
right,
them
but
to church on
remember,
Sunday,
this is 100
that alone
meters
could
and
help
not a
them on
marathon.
Monday.
So-
So, you know, I'll just be quick. The field slaves practiced what they had to do as a part of a liberation vehicle. So,
again,
if
remember
it
my
is-
time is
yes.
going.
I'm
So-
just asking if it is that the pharmacist could say he was not practicing Obia, but instead had gone
I need
over
to
to
take my
India
time.
and studied at the foot of the Indians, Saguru, who taught him mysticism, or maybe he went to
Tony,
Tibet and learned of
let me answer your
levitation
question.
and mindfulness.
Let me
Would
answer your
that-
question in relation to the Indians.
I'm saying if we change the word obia, would the principle still apply? Because what I'm seeing is that other cultures can come in with alt chemistry, mysticism,
All right.
mindfulness and
I-
meditation.
I'm
and
going
they
to
get
stop
away
you
with
right
murder.
there.
But the African obia,
And I'm going to attempt to
We are
answer
locked
your
up.
question in relation to the Indians. So, before I move on and take maybe one other response, there used to be a law called the Vagrancy Act. And the Vagrancy Act used to make it unlawful to do fortune telling. But the Vagrancy Act had other things. The Vagrancy Act also made prostitution illegal. It also made loitering on street corners at night illegal. It also made if the police just started to look suspicious at night, they could arrest and charge you and so on. In 1993, the Vagrancy Act was repealed in its entirety. So the laws against fortune telling went by the wayside. So all these Indian persons that are advertising are doing so legally because the law that forbids it no longer exists. But there is a law that governs Obia called the Obia Act, and it states that Obia is unlawful. Let me just take one other response as to what should the council do.
Hold on.
Hello. All right. I think the council, hello? I
Hello,
think
yes.
the council should suspend the pharmacist in question for practicing both obia and his trade, because there's no law that governs the practice of his profession with being an obia man. So I think that the council should suspend him for practicing such right.
All right, let me move on.
Thank you.
So, in 1760, following Taki's rebellion in St. Mary, was when the first law against obia was passed. Now, up to 1760, before the rebellion, your ordinary sugar planter was not interested in your slave's religion. But after an obia man told Taki that he was invulnerable to bullets, even though the obia man was shot and killed, and they realized the power of obia in fomenting slave rebellions, in 1760, the first law against obia was passed. And if you look in the history of Jamaica, Taki had been advised by a famous obia man and priest, an old Coromanti who had been a chief, who administered a powder which being rubbed on their bodies was to make them invulnerable, persuaded them into a belief that Taki could not be hurt by white men, for that he caught all the bullets fired at him in his hand and hurled them back with destruction to his foes. Well, it's clear he didn't have the formula. They needed to talk to Nanny, and you know how she was able to catch bullets. You know, she's the one they needed to have spoken to. The present Obia Act dates from 1898. And the first feature of the act is that obia is not defined. Section 2 says obia shall be deemed to be one and the same meaning as mileism. And neither is mile defined. So it seems that the assembly which passed that act seemed to assume everybody know what obia look like. If I can't tell you in words, if I see it, I know it. Which incident is the same description for pornography, just in case you want to know. It's hard to define, but you see it when you know it, and know it what it is. So, let us look at mileism, because mileism is a good part of obia according to the historical record. Obia is classic black magic. Mileism had at its center healing. Healing from sickness, healing from troubles. And it saw that all illness and troubles had a spiritual source. And it is the power of the Holy Spirit by which persons will be cleansed and healed. And the question I ask, how is that different from what takes place in mainstream religion? And then I pose the next question. Why couldn't a pharmacist be an obia man? Providing he follows the law of the land, specifically the Food and Drug Act, Pharmacy Act, and Larceny Act in relation to false pretenses. Why shouldn't he be able to retail his products, do a service, and also practice his craft? So these are some of the issues. My personal view, and not the view of the DPP or Ms. Llewellyn, is that I see no reason why the obia Act is still retained as a law in Jamaica. I think it can be swept away and no harm done. But in the end, looking at contraception, looking at abortion, and looking at obia, looking at areas which dealt with privacy, bodily autonomy, freedom of religion, it shows how it is that a pharmacist can be caught up in these constitutional issues, and then you would no longer be behind the counter. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. I see a question over here.
Okay, based on the very interactive presentation, Jeremy, we're going to limit the questions only to three. 3 questions only, as we have to ensure that we stay within the time frame. And we've done so, we've caught up, so we're going to try and do that.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I was wondering whether you're a comedian, more a comedian, over being a lawyer. Anyhow, the point is, if the Constitution, I would think, is if the supersedes all other laws, so how is it then that the pharmacy code of ethics could supersede what the Constitution states?
All right, well, in relation to some of these laws here, so I've deliberately chosen like the law of obia and the law in relation to abortion. What is contained in the Constitution, particularly when the Charter of Rights was enacted, is what is called a savings law clause. So that all laws that were in existence before the Charter of Rights came into being have been saved. So they can't really be challenged constitutionally. So if change is going to come, it is Parliament that has to make the change, hopefully to either amend or to repeal them. Secondly, that obligation as contrasted between the Law Reform Age of Majority Act. If you look at the hierarchy of laws and regulations, it is the law of the land that takes precedence over the code of ethics of the pharmacy. And the third question, no, I'm not a comedian. I'm an underpaid and overworked civil servant who has been on wage free since 2007.
Okay, next question here. There's someone over there with a question from that side? Had a hand up? Okay, Chris, she's behind you. All right, so after this gentleman, then her.
Thank you for a very informative delivery. As a former Calabar student, I hope I'm not being biased.
No,
But
you're not. I don't find that you're being
I
biased.
think I join the rest of my colleagues in saying you did a great job. As pharmacists, however, we need to be balanced. We also need to protect ourselves against legal repercussions. In the first scenario, you mentioned the importance of balance between principle versus obligation, law versus the welfare of the individual. You also raised in the first scenario of Miss Hot Body or whoever it was. Was it Hot Body?
Hot body, yes.
Or Healthy Body?
Hot body.
Oh, hot and healthy. All right, that was a scenario. But I'd like to raise quickly a situation that as pharmacists we face almost daily. Somebody comes into your place of business. Lord, me are dead. Me forget me inhaler. Me forget to take me insulin. You're going to make me dead? No. Question. Suppose that person should die on your premises. How will this pan out between the law and the individual? Or shortly after they leave the premises?
But my view is, and again, please don't hold me to it. My view is that a pharmacist, unless I suspect there are exigent circumstances, would have to abide by the letter of the law. So my view is that the omission, perhaps to hand over anything, if the pharmacist is strictly going by what their rules, regulations, and law says, ought not to culminate in a criminal charge against the pharmacist. So the most that would happen is a case like that would go to coroner's court, where the coroner would determine with a jury whether or not any criminal charges would have to be laid. But my view is that the omission to do so, if the pharmacist is strictly following his code and regulations of practice, would not result in a criminal charge. The estate may sue, but it won't result in a criminal charge.
Final question. Final question. Yes.
I would like to ask a question. In the case of the hot body lady, if she was supposed to get a lawyer, what are the different areas in which the pharmacist could be sued?
Well, the pharmacist could be sued, I quite suspect, for the neglect of duty. It could be sued for the discrimination against Gail Hotbody for refusing to dispense the medication for no good reason. I suspect libel and slander could also arise, since all of this was taking place in the public domain and so on. So those are the areas, I think.
I ask this question because I want pharmacists to realize that these things are at stake and they should be very careful when they're assisting their customers. They have to think it out very carefully.
Mm-hmm. All right. I know that I think I heard from the room what if the reverse happened in relation to the first scenario. You are protected under the law that as long as you followed all the requisite procedures, your requisite standard procedures, so that even if you gave them the drug and then they later died, it ought not to result in any criminal or civil liability as long as you followed the requisite procedures of your profession.
Okay, so this is a follow-up question to the one before, and that's it.
No, what you were mentioning is that if the patient, for example, would have been denied insulin, and then you mentioned what would have happened. But if the person was given, you're accommodating, you're assisting, and you give the person the insulin and they die, you would have gone without a prescription, because it's a prescription item.
Procedure, well, you may find yourself in some difficulty there. You may find yourself in some difficulty there. If at least disciplinary proceedings under the Pharmacy Act, and so on. That's it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.